Welcome to Timemark Radio Network. I'm Gemini, and today is Friday, September 14th, 2012. We have Dr. Ellie Phillips, author of Kiss Your Dentist Goodbye, joining us this evening. Dr. Ellie has 35 years of dental experience with a special interest in caring for geriatric patients and special needs children and adults. Dr. Ellie is a member of the American Dental Association, the New York State Dental Association, and the American Academy of Pediatric Dentists. Dr. Ellie was recently the Pediatric Outpatient Clinic Director at the Eastman Dental Center and a faculty member at the University of Rochester. You can learn more about Dr. Ellie at drecoaching.com and drellie.com. Hello, Dr. Phillips. Welcome to Time Monk Radio.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. Nice to talk with you.
Thank you. For 35 years, Dr. Phillips has been teaching that tooth decay and gum infections are preventable diseases. Today, she offers personalized and corporate coaching to help clients achieve ultimate oral health. Dr. Ellie founded Xylitol, a company that helps educate and distribute Xylitol products for all ages. Dr. Ellie is also a founding board member of the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health. Dr. Ellie, let's start with your passion for oral health and wellness and what led you to write your book, Kiss Your Dentist Goodbye.
Well, the title was a challenge. That was the last part of the story. The first part of the story began because I never enjoyed going to the dentist. I grew up in England, where dentistry, particularly for children, was quite a nightmare. And I hope it's changed today, but back then they never gave children anesthetics. Any cavity was usually cause for extraction of a tooth, often without adequate anesthesia. And if you talk to middle-aged Brits who remember their childhood dentistry days, I'm sure most of them were very traumatized. Now, I didn't have any tooth decay, and I was traumatized, mainly because my brother had a lot, and I used to have to watch him go through this unbelievable ordeal. And I grew up believing that I would like to help people avoid tooth decay. And that was sort of my reason for getting into dentistry. And it was a challenge back then. Women really were not perceived to be smart enough to be dentists. We were supposed to be nurses or secretaries. And I was lucky. I had a progressive father who helped me go to school and do the necessary things to get into college. They actually made women get AAA grades in physics, chemistry, and biology in order to even be accepted at dental school. So, it was a real hard challenge. I had to take it very seriously. We were not welcome as women in dental school. And if you're not welcome, usually the best thing to be is the top of the class, studious, and stay away from everybody else. And I think that kind of explains how I went through dental school, very passionate about the science and very determined to be the best I could possibly be. When I learned what dentistry was going to be, I didn't want to stay in England anymore, and that's kind of the beginning of the rest of my story. I was very fortunate. I moved. I moved to Switzerland, where really, even in 1970, they were so far ahead of the curve with preventive, natural means of prevention and natural holistic health, I guess we should call it today.
And you're the first female dentist in England, correct?
I was one of the first. There were very few women back in those days. I'm actually a big believer that even today in America, if you generally look around, and it's a horrible generalization, but I believe that, I've been looking for the last 20 years for people who feel as passionately as I do about preventing dental disease. And I'm sure that you'll understand it's not a particularly lucrative career. There's not much payment for preventing disease in America. This is a crazy thing. And I guess maybe women don't always have to be the breadwinners to the same degree, or maybe they went into the field for different reasons, but I have generally found more of a connection with preventive-minded hygienists with alternative medicine doctors and chiropractors, often women, who really get this idea of helping our patients avoid dental disease as being incredibly important. It's been a much, much tougher challenge to convert a traditional dentist in a traditional practice where they make their money fixing things. I mean, they often look at me as if I have two heads, and I've had quite a few years of that kind of attitude of what do you mean? This is not taught that you can prevent, and you can definitely reverse damage done to teeth. And it's relatively easy. That's the crazy thing.
Well, your book was an eye-opener for me, and let's talk about that a little bit, about the myths of current dentistry, from flossing to filling cavities and regular cleanings.
Well, that's right. I mean, I'm a big believer in evidence-based dentistry and evidence in going back to the science, to the studies. And dentistry has taken a long time to accept that opinions are not really what we're looking for. In medicine, evidence-based studies have been employed for quite a lot of years. In dentistry, it wasn't until the early 2004, I think it was, that they had their first evidence-based conference. And it was about all these very things. What about fluoride? What about toothbrushing? How effective are the studies on flossing, xylitol? All those things to do with diagnosis and treatment of tooth problems. And it was a most eye-opening, incredible meeting. I mean, I sat there. It was in Bethesda, Washington, and I knew what was coming because I'd been reading these things. But to actually hear people standing up saying that these fluoride treatments, for example, that are given out sometimes every 6 months to children right through their lives, have absolutely no effect unless you have a child with gross, out-of-control tooth decay. And in that situation, this very, very strong fluoride gel is basically so strong that it's poisoning the bacteria. So you are wiping out a mouthful of bacteria. But it's not the reason that most people take their children to the dentist for fluoride treatment. So, they went through each of these things. There isn't a single randomized clinical trial, not one, to show that flossing stops cavities. And if you understand the science of what causes a cavity, you understand why flossing can't stop cavities. But if you go to if you ask most people in the street, why do you have bad teeth, or why do you think you're going to have bad teeth? What they'll tell you is they don't floss, they eat too much sugar, and they miss some dental appointments. Those are the three things people believe give them cavities. Cavities are a bacterial infection. You pick up cavities when somebody with cavity infection kisses you. Most often it's a mother, or at least in older, ancient cultures, it was the mother. Today, with babysitters, and it's whoever interacts most frequently with the child, and it's dependent on how many bad bacteria in their mouths. And it literally is kissed from one person to another. And that's where we could stop this. We could stop this whole disease for 10 cents a day if there was an outcry to say, are you serious, Ellie? And I would say, not only am I serious, but we have evidence-based studies from 2001. They did an evidence-based review that showed 10 cents a day worth of xylitol, if given every single day, will wipe out the bacteria no matter how bad the mouth, even if you've got unfilled cavities, all the problems, broken teeth. Take people with the worst teeth in the world and give them 10 cents worth of xylitol each day. And if you do this, if they are the caretakers of the children, So they actually did this study with the mothers about to give birth, and they gave them the xylitol for the first year of the child's life. The children didn't get any xylitol, okay? Just cleaning the mother's mouth with this xylitol was able to get rid of the cavity bacteria. So when the mothers kissed the babies, they kissed healthy bacteria to the babies. And then the researchers went back every year. No more, just the xylitol was only dished out for 1 year. That's the cost, 1 year, 10 cents a day. Somebody do the math for me. What is it, like $50, $60? I mean, it's nothing. And these children at 6 years old had 80% less cavities than the rest of the population with no other intervention. No fluoride, no dentist, nothing.
Wow.
There isn't an argument for not doing that. It's evidence-based. It's proven to work. And if we could educate people, we could stop. Whoever's out there on this program tonight, you could have the worst teeth in the world and be about to give birth, and you have the opportunity to use xylitol to change the outcome for your baby. And then if you wipe it on the baby teeth to guarantee success, not 80%, but then you get like 98%, almost virtual guarantee, that child will never have decay. And then if that's continued through the family, that's the end of this disastrous oral health history in your family.
You mentioned that this bacteria is passed, from kissing one another. What about from eating after one another?
Yes,
Sharing forks.
Sharing dip. You go to a Super Bowl party and you've got people all dipping in the dip and double dipping, and that's certainly, I think that's a great possibility. I put it lower on the scale because I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just me, but I don't know a lot of people that would pick food up that way, but certainly mothers licking the spoon for a baby or sucking a pacifier, or grandma has baby and is tasting the food, that kind of thing most definitely is a concern. More than that, I'm very concerned about toothbrush hygiene, what we do with our toothbrushes. And in New York State, there was a big effort some years ago to insist that preschool children brush their teeth. It sounds like a cool idea, but then when you looked at where the toothbrushes were stored, they're all stored in this nasty little container, all right next door to each other. So if one child has cavities, you know that those toothbrushes are probably all getting picked up by a different child. I mean, it is the worst idea to make children at preschool brush their teeth. It's doing absolutely nothing. Brushing teeth, even if you're a hygienist and you brush and you floss your teeth absolutely perfectly, you will only remove 40% of the plaque that is potentially responsible for cavities. That's if you do it perfectly. That's not at preschool. That's the hygienist doing that at home. And the reason is that the bacteria are not just on your teeth. They're not just around your teeth. They're on your tongue. They're on the skin of your mouth. They're up your eustachian tubes into your ears. The bacteria go up into your nose, at the back of your soft palate, and connect. There's even research to show and to prove this point that children who eat xylitol and have healthy mouths have 50% less ear infections because they don't get the sticky stuff, the sticky bacteria of middle ear otitis media. And that's another well-documented study that's been done, that why on earth, if for no other reason, wouldn't we give small children a little bit of xylitol and eliminate 50% of ear infections? So, the transmissibility is a very important thing for a lot of reasons. Toothbrushes, I think, are a real problem. And again, my problem with people flossing is that as you floss, you may be spraying your infectious strep mutans all over other people's toothbrushes. Community living for special needs patients. I'm extremely concerned about what goes on in the communities for those guys. Often people who have very bad oral hygiene anyway, and then if you're trying to brush their teeth with an infected toothbrush, picked up something worse than they had already. And why aren't we helping these, disadvantaged people by giving them xylitol? And the same goes for assisted living centers and nursing homes. I mean, the application for xylitol is so huge, so enormous, so potentially dramatic, and yet there is no support. I gave thousands of small packets of xylitol that could be added to water for our local assisted living center in upstate New York here. I went to the dentist. I used to work in this particular nursing home. I knew how bad the plaque problem was there, and all they had to do was put this in a bottle of water and give it to these patients every day. And about 3 months later, after I had donated all the products, I had donated some mints and I donated these packets that could go in water for people who didn't like the mints. Not any of the product was ever used. None of it. Because the doctors didn't want to write the orders for any more things. They were already taking so many medications, they're just not interested. The only people interested are families. You have to teach your family. You have to do this research for yourself. It will never come, as far as I can see, from any other avenue. And the only way we'll ever get it is if there's a financial incentive. I mean, in preschool in Scandinavia, they hand out xylitol candies to the children. I mean, it's handed out as a public health measure. It has done for 50 years.
So once you eradicate the bacteria that's in your mouth, what are your thoughts on regular cleanings? Because we're all under the perception that we need to have a dental cleaning every 6 months.
Well, exactly. And there's no science. Honestly, there is absolutely no science behind that either. I was fortunate because I grew up before the era of hygienists. I was a dentist in the 70s, and the era of hygienists actually began in the late 70s and maybe even nearer to the early 80s when it started to become a source of income, a revenue source in dental practices. And over the years, the 6 months recall has become the average mantra. And there is no science behind that at all. And in fact, if you have cleanings when you don't need them, I believe two things can happen. And again, I want to jump back just a tiny bit because the whole idea of oral health is not just about cleaning teeth. That's the old idea about having an infection and you have to get the antibiotic and you have to wipe out all the bacteria. And most people today know now that when you do that, particularly with digestive bacteria, if you wipe out all of the bacteria in your intestine, the chances are you will get super infection. Well, three things will happen. You'll get resistance, you'll get super infection with other bacteria that may be even more dangerous and more harmful, and it also opens a potential for fungal infections and molds and things like that to take hold, particularly people who are not very strong immune system. And it is exactly the same. Your mouth and your digestive system are absolute mirror images of each other. If you wipe out all the bacteria in your mouth, you leave yourself prone to picking up the next bacteria that's coming your way. If your toothbrush happens to be within 10 feet of a toilet, it could be an E. coli or a toilet bacteria of some kind, which have been implicated in gum disease and halitosis, bad breath. The thing is, though, you don't want to wipe out all the bacteria. What you really want to do is, and I liken your mouth sort of to a fish tank. You want to balance your mouth ecology. You want to make sure that you have the right balance of the right bacteria. And that's one of the incredible things that xylitol does. And I can explain how it gets rid of the bad bacteria in a minute, but it gets rid of the bad bacteria. At the same time, it promotes and feeds and nurtures the good ones. And it suppresses fungi, fungal infections, candidal infections, molds, and all those kind of things. So what goes on in your mouth when you're eating xylitol is that you are helping to not clean in that aggressive way, but balance mouth bacteria. And ultimate oral health is the point at which your mouth is so balanced, you don't develop any plaque. You don't have problems with your teeth. And so I knew that I was at that place. So I did not have a cleaning for 28 years. And when I went to the hygienist to ask to have a cleaning, I said I hadn't been in a while. I didn't tell her how long. She didn't know exactly who I was. She was new to the practice. She just joined our practice. And I sat in the chair, and she looked around and said, "Oh, his teeth look great. You know, I mean, it's fine. I don't even know if we have to do a cleaning." Now, I was really excited about that because that's exactly what a hygienist ought to say to you. If your mouth is balanced, the last thing you want to do is unbalance it. Baking soda, peroxide, chlorhexidine, very, very strong antibacterials do the same thing like an antibiotic. They wipe out everything. And that isn't what you're looking for. You're looking for, it's like a garden. You want to get rid of the weeds, but you need flowers and grass. You don't want to just blowtorch the garden. That's when you get erosion, that's when you get problems, and that's exactly the same with teeth. And most people who have terrible gum recession, some of them you'll find them wandering around the health food stores. I do that a lot because I believe in a lot of those healthy organic products, but in the toothpaste aisle of health food stores, I cringe because most of the products are made with baking soda, too abrasive salt, and oftentimes peroxide. And all those things can totally unbalance your mouth health. They are too good at cleaning. They are too powerful. And people who use them, especially if they have a somewhat weak immune system, end up with gum recession like you wouldn't believe. Sometimes they can lose their teeth. Just painless, no swelling, the teeth just loosen and fall out. It's that dangerous.
Dr. Ellie?
Yes.
I have a question. Have you ever heard of tooth soap? I've been using some tooth soap made with coconut oil and olive oil and essential oil. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's great. There are two definitions for me. People who have great teeth. My grandson, for example, my grandchildren, but particularly my grandson, because the mother is home all the time, he always has xylitol. He is certainly going to grow up with healthy teeth. He has a great, Western-priced diet. Everything is right for that child to grow up to have fantastic teeth. Plus, he's a man. And one of the interesting things is that men and women have very different mouth chemistry. The chemistry of your mouth affects the health of your teeth. And what I'm going to say is that if you've got healthy teeth and a healthy mouth, as long as you're not damaging that healthy environment, I think you have a number of options. You could brush your teeth with xylitol. You could just rinse your mouth with salt water, and it might work. If you've got really, really healthy teeth and you're eating a really, really healthy diet, I don't think you need much at all. I do think you need to massage your gums But you could do that with a nice toothbrush and a little bit of, and if this tooth soap, I love coconut oil. I'm a big believer in essential oils. The person who developed that hopefully has used it himself for years and has had great success with it. Now, on the other hand, if I use coconut oil on my teeth, they can become sensitive very quickly. I'm not sure why. I think coconut oil for women may be slightly different. And I mean, these are the things we have to know more about and study more. I'm only one person. What I have discovered is that if you have great teeth, you have choices. If you have damaged teeth, I have a system that you can use, and you can take your damaged teeth to a completely different level, and sometimes to a level of complete ultimate oral health, even if you started out with some cavities, some damaged gums, inflammation. You can have been told that you needed $6,000 worth of gum surgery. And if you use the system that I recommend exactly, you will be able to undo all that damage no matter what kind of things are against you. And the things that are against you is if you have a dry mouth or if you have mouth acidity. You remember I said that as a man, and I hope the guy who developed the tooth soap is a man and has used it, because that is very important knowledge. Because men tend to have alkaline saliva, and that alkaline saliva protects your teeth unless you are a horrible soda drinker or unless you have nasal allergies and you have no saliva, or maybe you take medications, or you have a reason your teeth stick out over your lower lip, so your teeth are dry all the time. Men generally have a reason why they have tooth decay that is based on their diet, or more often what they drink, or because they have dry mouth. For some reason, they sleep with their mouth open. They have allergies, as I say, medications, that kind of thing. Women, on the other hand, we get acidic saliva every month of our lives. I mean, from the age, of menstruation cycles, the hormone changes, a slight dip or a slight raise in estrogen. I mean, it's continuous for women's mouths to be affected. If you try to test the pH of a woman's mouth, it will probably not be the same in 3 hours. And it varies through the day. It varies what you're doing. It varies on our stress levels. And stress to a woman appears, from certainly testing my own saliva, to be as simple as packing a suitcase. Whereas for a man, to get their saliva to change pH usually involves, something catastrophic. Loss of a spouse, loss of a child, bankruptcy, terrible things in their lives, out of control. Women don't have those. To us, the stress sufficient to change our mouth acidity can be just going to the dentist. Anything. So when you have an acidic mouth, you need more help and more protection. And that's where I'm going to say that tooth soap may be fine for you, but you probably couldn't get me to commit to using it unless I was really sure that some other older ladies with a potential for acidic mouth acidity had used it successfully for decades and found it to be fantastic. And the trouble is that people don't prove any of these things to you. How do you know one good toothpaste from another? You really don't. I know that there are things in toothpaste that you should absolutely avoid. Triclosan, or triclosan, the antibacterial that's put in hand soap. You never want that in your mouth, never. It's banned in Europe. It should not be in toothpaste, and it is. It's recommended by a lot of dentists. So I have this very specific regimen that I have found over my 35 plus years of being a dentist, I discovered that certain toothpastes can actually combat incredibly high risk factors. And that is really what I teach people, is what will work. But if you're finding that you have no decay, you have very comfortable teeth, they shine, they're a great color, you never need a cleaning, you have no plaque buildup, I mean, that's what ultimate oral health is, and that's what you need, where you need no treatment, where you go to the dentist and they should look in your mouth and say, wow, your teeth look great. I think going once a year is plenty in that situation. There's absolutely no reason to go twice a year. And actually, Kim, back to your question, how often do you know how to go? I mean, some people go every 4 months for cleaning. What those people need to know is there are studies that show if we measured the bad bacteria in your mouth 2 days before cleaning, yes, the numbers would go right down at the time of the cleaning, but 2 days after the cleaning, you would have more bad bacteria than you had 2 days before. Did I say 2 days after? 2 days after the cleaning, you had more bacteria than you had before. And that is because as you have the cleaning, you're kind of seeking the weeds. You're reseeding the bad bacteria. So don't ever think that more and more frequent cleanings are going to make your teeth healthier. They're going to weaken your enamel. Every time they polish your enamel, you're taking the hardest layer off your teeth. You're reseeding the bad bacteria. And you are just developing this cycle of dependence that will never get better. Ask any of your older members of your family, did the cleanings get less frequent or more frequent as they got older? And if you ask my family, very few of them have ever had cleanings. And actually, just to tell you, this happens at any age. My father passed away, and my mother, who was in her 80s, met a young 75-year-old, and he and she have been with each other now for 8 years. And in those 8 years, he moved away from Washington. He has not seen a dentist for 8 years. And just like everybody else, he used to go every 6 months for his cleanings and so on. Of course, my mother pushed him on my program of Xylitol and these mouth rinses. But this summer, he went back to see his dentist after not having attended for 8 years in his late 70s, early 80s. His teeth are now so white, he has a crown at the back of his mouth that looks yellow that used to match. But his own teeth have become stronger, and as they become stronger, they become naturally whiter. And his dentist said there's nothing to do. His teeth are fantastic. With 8 years of not going, his teeth got whiter, shinier, and healthier. And I'm not surprised. So it is the exact opposite of everything that you've been trained to believe. Even flossing. Do you floss, Kim?
Yes, I do.
Oh, you do?
Yes. Yeah. The standard, floss every day. Do what
Yeah.
you're supposed to do.
The thing with floss is it can actually damage your gum health. I mean, that's another staggering thing to think about. If you have swollen gums that bleed, and when you floss, you make them bleed, you may be opening up a wound into which spirochetes and harmful gum bacteria can go, get into your bloodstream, and travel all around your body. I mean, in your introduction, you mentioned that I was a founding member of this organization for oral systemic health. This is to teach people that bacteria from your mouth have the potential to do terrible things to your body. If you have a family history of dementia or Alzheimer's, you should test yourself and make sure that you do not have spirochetes, which are little wormy bacteria, in your gums. Because spirochetes are able to get through and into your bloodstream, and they go to your brain. And you may have a family infection that's being passed down through generations. If you have a family history of arthritis, you should check that you do not have a bacteria called P. gingivalis, which hides in pockets around teeth. Because P. gingivalis has been found to lodge in joints if it gets into your bloodstream. And then there are the bacteria that can cause inflammation around your gums. And there are bacteria that can even go into your heart from your gums. And the other thing that to me is staggering is that a mother with gum disease, that gum disease is 7 times more likely to damage her fetus than smoking or drinking. But if you take the average pregnant woman that you know in your circle of friends, if you ask her what she changed, or if she was a smoker or a drinker, did she know that that's bad for her baby? Probably yes. But why don't they know that their gum health is even more, 7 times more damaging, more likely to cause preterm birth and damage the fetus? And I can't answer why that is. I have no idea why we have this knowledge. We've had this knowledge for so many years, and there's nobody getting it out there. There's a new study actually came out August the 30th, right on my top of my desk here. Half of U.S. adults have periodontal disease. That's not just bleeding gums. That is disease that can cause the things that I've just mentioned. Dementia, Alzheimer's, that there are links with these systemic problems that have, it isn't causality always, but there is a connection. And right now there's a bit of a fight about this connection, but there is definitely a connection. And if you are at risk in your family for these medical problems, I would suggest you get one of these tests. It's called oral DNA. And basically you spit into a test tube. You just spit into a little tube, they send it off to the lab, and then $100 later, thereabouts, you would know if you have any of the 13, well, actually know if there are any of the 11 bacteria that should be big concern for you. So you can go to oraldna.com and see, it's called My Periopath, which means my periodontal pathogen. It's what that you find out what bacteria are in your mouth. Only a dentist can take that test, but it's very non-invasive, and I think everybody should have it done. Everybody, particularly families with dementia.
What do you think about water picks, especially if you use xylitol in the water?
If you have perfect teeth, I think they may be fine. They're fun, if you like using them. I deal mainly, my consultations are with people who usually have pocketing that's greater than 4 millimeters, somewhere between 4, 8, even 10 millimeter pockets. And what I have discovered through many, many years of consulting with people, I can get them better with xylitol and my mouth rinse system. When they use a water pick, they get stuck. They'll get the resolution, the pockets will go away, they'll get down to 4 millimeters, but they will never get lower than 4 millimeters. It's almost as if the pressure of that thing keeps the tissue from healing itself right up. When I take them off the water pick and let them just use the rinses, we can get all those pockets to go away, and they get right up to having ones and twos, or nones. They get rid of the pocketing around their teeth. I don't know if you have pocketing around your teeth. Pocketing is like a looseness of the gums around your teeth. Just like you put your hand in your pocket, there's a flap of gum between the tooth the surface of the tooth and the inside edge of the gum flap, there's a space where stuff can lodge. And it sounds like you would really think a water pick would sort of wash it away. But I think what it does is it damages the growth of the tissue back against the tooth. So I take people off the water pick if they're trying to resolve gum pockets. And I get complete resolution. So in my book, at one point, the first time I published the first 3,000 copies, I think I actually have the water pick okay in there. But the more I consulted and the more I got these really tough cases to deal with, the more I tell people, stop with that. Put it in the cupboard. Get your mouth healthy. And then if you want to go back to using it, if it's fun, use it. But I do not believe it is the answer to gum disease, any more than I believe the answer to gum disease is flossing. I do not. If you love to floss, then floss before you use the mouth rinse system that I recommend. If you don't have any problems with your teeth and you floss, I don't have any problem with that. But if you have gum disease, if you have receding gums, if you have bleeding gums, if you have a family history of medical problems, I would beg you to reconsider flossing and use my system instead, at least until you are healthy again. So, I kind of feel like it's the emphasis. Our emphasis has been on the wrong things. And I don't know if it's because Procter & Gamble sponsor the American Dental Association, or I don't know why this emphasis is so weird. I guess it seems logical that cleaning teeth makes sense. It's sort of the same logic, though, that taking an antibiotic wipes out bad bacteria. And then we discovered, oh, hey, wait a minute, maybe that's not such a good idea. And I think this is the same thing with teeth. It takes years for the wheel to turn and the studies to be done and new training. Train the young people today in dental schools to think about probiotics. Talk to a 50, 60-year-old dentist, they probably don't know what a probiotic is, except the very, the ones who really keep up. But the ones who sit in their own offices doing crown and bridge work all day may have never heard of a probiotic or know that it could help mouth health or how it would help.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
Well, it's a challenge to know, when you're told these things, I mean, filling a cavity. When you have a cavity, if you go to the dentist and they find a cavity, I would tell you, if that's the first time you've been told about that cavity, I would tell you to give it a whirl, to try and repair that by yourself at home, and go back, cancel your filling appointment, and then go back 6 to 12 months later and see what's happened. And maybe don't go for a filling appointment, cancel your filling appointment, and then go in for another checkup. And the chances are, I would lay a bet, if you actually do the whole system properly, the way I lay out in the book and on my website, that you will find an early cavity like that is definitely gone away in 6 months. A more extensive cavity that may have taken a couple of years to form will probably go away in a year. It really isn't that difficult to get a cavity to go away.
That's fascinating, Dr. Ellie. I just can't believe you know so much about this, and it goes against everything that you've ever been told. One thing that I was going to ask about is the ancient Ayurvedic practice of oil pulling. Are you familiar with that? What do you think of that? Is that positive?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm familiar with it. I think that it is a cure for periodontal disease. I think oil pulling done, I'm most familiar with it with coconut oil. I think you can do it with castor oil. I'm not sure of the other oils that are being used, but I think coconut oil is somewhat antibacterial. I think this thing of pulling, if you keep it in your mouth for 15, 20 minutes and really do that, I think you can eliminate the harmful bacteria of periodontal disease quite quickly and effectively. If I went to the dentist and I was told that I had periodontal disease, if you're really committed to doing this for 20 minutes every morning, putting the oil in your mouth, I believe that you will see incredible resolution. However, I'd rather use my system of xylitol mouth rinses because I can't walk around with that oil in my mouth for 20 minutes. I find it gross, and then you got to spit it out and then wash it out, and it made my teeth hurt a bit. I mean, I have tried it, so I would know what it felt like. But to me, walking around with this big blob of oil in my mouth was gross. But you know what? If you can't get to a Walgreens to buy the exact products that I recommend, or you refuse to use them because I'm recommending things that you're very, very so uncomfortable with, you just cannot use them, I'm okay with oil pulling, because I really think you can do a terrific job of getting rid of harmful, unwanted bacteria in your mouth. And that is key for your general health. So I think they're right on, just like most of these things. Xylitol was mentioned in Chinese herbal medicine, the book, Chinese herbal medicine book of 2,500 years ago.
Really?
So 2,500 years ago, I have an old periodontal, a book of periodontology before there were periodontists, clinical periodontology it's called. It was written in the 50s, I think. And it mentions in China that they knew soft tissue disease and hard tissue disease of the mouth, and that the solution was a product called Zine, Xylitol, T-O-N-G. Tong is sugar in Chinese. Zine, I believe, is white, and he is tree. So it's Xylitol, which almost sounds like xylitol when you say it fast enough and often enough, but it translates to sugar from the white tree, is what I am told. And in China, the birch tree does grow in the northern parts of China, and they are very familiar with xylitol. You can go to Walmart in Beijing and find xylitol everywhere. It's in the bins by the checkout counter. In Turkey, they get the gum from a birch tree and chew that. In Russia, they get the birch sap and get the kids to swish it around their teeth when their teeth erupt. Up here in upstate New York, if you go to the local forest and talk to the forest people, the knowledgeable men there, they will tell you that Native Americans used the twigs and made little, almost like toothpicks out of birch wood.
I've heard that,
to clean their teeth. Mm-hmm. And of course, that has a xylitol in the wood. It's this is where, they were right on it. They knew about the bacteria, and they were dealing with bacteria. I believe that we need to massage our gums. That is the main reason for toothbrushes. And I think the old-fashioned concept of chewing a stick, a birch stick, into a bristly thing and then massaging their gums, they were not only killing, but getting rid of the bacteria. And I haven't spoken about how xylitol does that, and I should. But massaging the gums and getting rid of the bacteria, you will have oral health. If you have disease, then you need other things. You can either do it the modern way that I suggest with chlorine dioxide, which I believe pulls in 1 minute what oil pulling takes 20 minutes to do. I believe that this product I recommend, this Closest Mouth Rinse, really works on the same principles as oil pulling. Because I've actually tried it on my fingernails. I do quite a lot of yard work and get dirt under my cuticles, and you go wash your hands, you've still got dirt under the cuticles. If you put a little bit of this first mouth rinse that I recommend, this Closest, first on your dirty cuticles, and then wash your hands will be clean. It literally pulls the dirt out of that ridge area around your fingers. I then tried it with my toenails and had the same success. So, I believe this is what it's doing in your mouth. I can't prove it, but that is my feeling of how this thing works. So, that's the mouth rinse system that I recommend uses the equivalent of oil pulling. The only toothpaste I recommend is the age-old Crest from the 50s. And the reason I recommend that one at this point is because it contains silica. And silica has the ingredients, the calcium and the phosphates, that teeth need to rebuild themselves. And they will rebuild themselves very quickly in the presence of the right amount, which is a tiny amount, of sodium fluoride. And I am an anti-fluoridationist. We should all get together and get the fluoride out of our drinking water immediately. This is ridiculous and it should end. But if you have damaged teeth, the only way I know for you to repair them is to use a tiny amount of sodium fluoride along with a little bit of silica. And the Crest original toothpaste is beautifully constructed. They did it in the 50s, long before this was a business. They did it when they were trying to make a great toothpaste. I'm sorry about the colors. I wish it didn't have other things. But you only need the amount of a pea, a little bit bigger than a rice grain on your toothbrush. And massage it around your gums and where the gums and the teeth meet, a little bit over the teeth. And in a matter of a minute, the ingredients in that toothpaste can protect your teeth, can help heal cavities. If you have damaged teeth or they're not the right color, try it. And you will be amazed how that combination of sodium fluoride and silica can help you.
Oh.
I recommend Listerine, which makes everybody go, you're kidding me. But Listerine is really the old thieves. It's eucalyptus, menthol, and thymol. I mean, it's 3 essential oils. It's in alcohol, and it's very acidic, and I would only recommend it if you've applied the toothpaste, this Crest toothpaste, to your teeth, so you've kind of covered your teeth in a force field. Then you rinse with the Listerine. The cool thing about the Listerine is eucalyptus, menthol, and thymol get rid of the bad bacteria that you don't want, but they do not destroy the protein layer that you do want on the outside of your teeth. And that's the difference between using Listerine to clean your gums rather than using peroxide or baking soda. The peroxide and the baking soda dissolve the protein layers as well as the bacteria, leaving your teeth basically sort of denuded. They're stripped. And we don't want that. We want to get rid of that bacteria and then let the teeth pick up, because they're going to immediately pick up good ones. So we have to be very selective about what you use. And this is why this system of mine came about, and it's proven itself 28, 30 years of using it, no matter what age you are, you continue to have sustainable, balanced oral health. Now, it does involve the xylitol, and xylitol works in a really cool way. The bad bacteria that cause cavities and the beginning of gum disease are a bacteria called Streptococcus mutans. This is the problem. Strep mutans feeds on sugars, any carbohydrate, even fruit sugars, any sugar. And when it feeds on the sugars, it grows, multiplies, and as it's multiplying, it produces the acids that destroy the tooth surface, makes the tooth porous so that it can get inside the teeth. That's how these bacteria get into your tooth. They dissolve a passageway into your tooth. The reason they can stick on your teeth is they also produce sticky, almost like tendrils almost like spider web, made out of these sugars. And they stick not only to your teeth, but they stick to each other. And as they layer, this is what plaque is. Plaque is layer upon layer of these sticky Streptococcus mutans. New Streptococcus mutans are little round balls. Old Streptococcus mutans are like worms. They're longer and like little cylinders, and they line up. And as they get thicker and thicker, that's when they get more and more dangerous, because the inside wormy ones start to become anaerobic. They live without oxygen. And as they turn and they're changing all the time. The older the bacteria, the worse they are. And these ones, once they reach a couple of weeks old, will start damaging your gums. So these are the worst bacteria. If you never have these bacteria, you cannot get cavities, because you will not have these bacteria stuck on your teeth. And what happens is when you feed these bacteria xylitol, xylitol is a smaller sugar molecule. It's a pentose sugar. It's a 5-carbon sugar alcohol, unlike sorbitol, maltitol, and all the others. Xylitol is right on its own. It is a health sugar. It is a completely different structure. The cool thing is that strep mutans absorb it. And when they absorb it, they can't use it. They are unable to process it. So they cannot stick to each other, so they become slippery. They cannot produce the thick plaque, so they cannot become dangerous. They cannot stick to the tooth surface, so the next time you brush your teeth, they're going to fall off if they don't fall off by themselves. And they cannot reproduce because they don't have the energy to reproduce. So constantly feeding a little tiny bit, 1 gram of xylitol, 4, 5, or 6 times a day. It's like, here, have some of that. Here, have a little bit more. And as you do that, layer after layer of these plaque bacteria will peel away from the skin of your mouth, from the dorsum of your tongue, from the ear tubes. Gradually, in that nature's way, it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. But if you keep feeding these sticky bacteria a tiny bit of xylitol, over 5 weeks, if you went and looked at the teeth after 5 weeks, the teeth would be completely clean. No more strep mutans on your teeth. And at the end of 6 months, you could test somebody's saliva, and there would be 98% of the strep mutans gone, even in the saliva. You can't brush your saliva. You can't floss saliva. How are you going to deal with the 60% of the strep mutans that's up your ears, back of your nose, in your saliva without xylitol? I don't know how you can look after your teeth without it. Once, if you're either prone to an infection or if you have this infection. And we believe that almost everybody in America has strep mutans right now. And poor children, low socioeconomic groups, it's a disaster. And we have a solution. And the solution is not harmful. This does not kill bacteria. It just makes the strep mutans slip off your teeth. And the healthy bacteria take their place in your mouth. There are almost 1,000 different kinds of bacteria in your mouth. Strep mutans is the one kind that forms plaque. There may be one other kind, just to be for completeness. There may be another kind that infects small children, but it would appear that xylitol works to protect that as well. And the other bacteria that are problematic are only problematic once you have got damaged gums. The 11 bacteria that are the other out of the 1,000 bacteria in your mouth, the strep mutans forms plaque. The other 11 bad guys, the only other bad guys, are called opportunistic bacteria. They wait for the opportunity to crawl into those spaces around your teeth where the gum has got infected. If you never have if you never have bleeding gums, if you have perfect gum health, you will not get those opportunistic bacteria becoming a problem. They'll be in your mouth, they'll be around, a few of them, you can't help it. But they only become a problem when you give them the opportunity. You give them the environment, dark and protected and anaerobic, no low oxygen. They need they need the right housing in order to be there. So xylitol is such a protection. It's unbelievable.
So the xylitol it helps to get rid of the strep that you're talking about, and then once you've healed your gums, then you can be rid of all the other bad ones?
You probably need my entire system or serious oil pulling for months to get rid of these other bacteria. And I mean, what I've done is mainly research on people who've got these opportunistic bacteria. If they take this oral DNA test, they can get a graph to show the titer of each of these different pathogens, each of these different 11 kinds of bacteria. Most people have two. They're divided into the really bad ones. There are four, is it 3 or 4? I'm just looking at my chart here. There are 4 really bad bacteria, really harmful. And then there are 6 that are moderate. And there is 1 that is low risk. Those are the 11s. That's the breakdown. But, for example, I took a test on this woman who was about to have her teeth straightened because they were moving. And she is a woman in her late 50s, early 60s. I said, why are your teeth moving? I don't know, but the dentist said I needed braces. And I said to her, why don't we just take one of these tests? You spit into a test tube. Let's just make sure that it's not a disease that's moving your teeth. And she had the highest titer I have ever seen of the most aggressive bacteria. They're like little amoeba that get into your bloodstream and they cause tumors around your body and in your digestive tract. And nobody was looking for this. They were going to put her in braces around her teeth to stop them moving. What she needed was to get rid of these bad bacteria before she killed herself with them.
Wow.
And, I mean, we did a test 2 months later. I mean, she had 10 to the power 7. It was off the charts with the most dangerous bacteria. If you do this oral DNA testing, you'll get a chart, and you'll see that it's colored purple. It's the rest of the bad ones are red, but this is purple. It's so horrendous. And she was off the charts, 10 to the power 7 and beyond. We don't even know how many of these critters were in her mouth. 2 months on my program, nothing else. And we got them down to 10 to the power 5, which still is not good. But it is extraordinary to have done it without her seeing a dentist at all. She happened to be traveling. She couldn't get to a dentist. And I had looked up this particular bacteria and found out that actually licorice helps get rid of that bacteria also. So she loves licorice. So, if we start addressing people's bacteria and get them well, this is exciting stuff. I think we'll stop a lot of nasty medical problems for people.
Oh, this is fascinating. Thank you.
Well, it's exciting. It's exciting and it's not difficult. And the results that I have seen with my system have been that in 2 months, there's been always so much resolution that it's measurable. If I have a couple of cardiologists, they're preventive cardiologists. They work with people to prevent them having a heart attack, which is unlike most cardiologists see you when you either need a new heart or you've already had a heart attack. People go to this particular group, and they're actually up in Spokane, Washington, Dale Doneen is the name of this cardiology group. They give quite a lot of seminars now. They're starting to talk with dentists and on this very subject. And Brad Bale, Dr. Bale, tells a story of a gentleman, and they measure a lot of the C-reactive proteins. They measure for body inflammation because, as I'm sure you know, the reason for most heart attacks is because of inflammation. It triggers a heart attack. And now they discovered a patient who they couldn't get him better. And he happened actually to be married to a dentist. This is the irony of the whole thing. And she had said his teeth were fine. Well, they sent him for one of these tests, and they found that he tested to have these bacteria in his mouth, and that was what was causing the inflammation. And they put him on my system of mouth rinses and Xylitol, and within 2 months, they had not only the bacteria gone, but his risk for heart attack was down by 75%. I mean, they had it so down so quickly. It was quicker than anything else that they've ever seen. So they put most of their patients now on my regimen of mouth rinses to prevent heart attacks.
And it just goes to show that when a doctor's not paying attention to what's going on in your mouth, they're not paying attention to your health.
Well, it's really sad. I mean, since then, there was the American Dental Association came out with something absolutely incredible, saying something to the effect that you know, mouth health and body health is not related, and they had sort of taken a horrible headline and misinterpreted. And of course, one of the things you have to wonder about is, are they worried about lawsuits? I mean, that's the unfortunate thing. If somebody dies of a heart attack and they find that they had gum disease, are there lawyers? Do they have a case if the dentist hasn't discovered the gum disease? You know, I think that's behind a lot of this stuff that's taking so long. People are scared of litigation. But in your own family, don't be scared. Just get everybody to understand the importance of oral health. And we cannot wait for the medical profession to catch up, whether it's a daughter having a baby, or even fertility is affected by gum disease. It goes on and on. I can tell you that the things that are good for your body, like probiotics and omega-3s and an anti-inflammatory diet, certainly will help your gum health. I'm a believer in all those things. And it all comes around. Everything is sort of connected, because stress makes your mouth acidic. Stress changes your mouth bacteria. You know, we all are working together. Anyone in naturopathic medicine, I feel so at home with them, because we're all working to get these people's bodies to be alkaline, to be rested and not stressed. And you need exercise, you need the balance of everything.
Well, this is just fascinating. Thank you so much for the wonderful work you're doing. It's just, this is great.
Well, I am thinking of writing a next book. I'm also contemplating changing the title and giving it another whirl under a new title. I don't know. I mean, I think the next book would be more about probiotics and what you can do once you're healthy. I really don't know any other way to get healthy except to use these over-the-counter products. But, and I'm talking about Listerine and Act and Crest and things that are in a way a bit tough for some holistic people to come to terms with using. But I would view it in the same way that you might view an illness. We all want to be healthy. But when we get a really serious illness, we may need a course of antibiotics. We may need something we don't really like. But once we're better again, then we can go back more holistic ways, maybe even more than before. And hopefully we help our children never to need the fixing part. I mean, I have nothing good to say about filling materials. I mean, whether it's the mercury in silver fillings, I mean, be aware that the white fillings are really no better. They are full of bisphenol A, BPA. Don't think a sealant is magical for your teeth. It's usually packed with BPA, which is an estrogen-mimicking hormone. So you do not want to spread that all over your children's teeth if you can avoid it. I am totally against the idea of fillings, against the idea of sealants. I mean, the only filling I think is safe is gold.
We are speaking with Dr. Ellie Phillips. You can visit Dr. Ellie's website, www.drellie.com, and that's DrEllie.com, where you can learn more about her approach to dental health and the benefits of xylitol. You can also find Dr. Ellie's book, Kiss Your Dentist Goodbye, at all good bookstores and online retailers. Dr. Ellie, let's talk about karyostatic food, sugars, and foods that are harmful, and how we can make our mouth more alkaline.
Certainly. The most important thing is this: whatever you eat, and this is something that was so useful for me to learn, and I learned it the first day that I went to work in private practice in Switzerland. And what they simply said to their patients there was, make sure that you end every meal with a tooth protective food. Now, of course, the Swiss only eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner in a very organized Swiss way. I mean, if you said that to the average American, I mean, they're snacking, they're drinking. How many times a day is their saliva undiluted in their mouth in America? I mean, just think about the majority of people you know. If it isn't that they're eating and snacking, it's that they're constantly drinking, whether we're drinking coffee, water, sodas, obviously, is a huge thing, energy drinks, beer, wine, all day long. The amount of time spent eating and drinking in an American culture is incredible. Whether it's little children, I just had my granddaughter to stay. It was continuous. She was always thirsty. And in Switzerland, back in the 70s, all we had to do was tell people at the end of breakfast, make sure you end the meal with a tooth protective food, same thing after lunch, same thing after dinner. People didn't walk around. I still don't think today that people in Europe walk around with to-go drinks in the way that we do here in America. They tend to sit in the cafe, have it with their meal, finish, and that's it. So protecting your teeth, what you eat during the meal, honestly doesn't matter to your teeth. It may affect your general health, and that may affect how alkaline your body is. But if we're just talking about protecting your teeth, and I think that's where I have to start with most patients, think about the last thing on your teeth at the end of a meal. It is even as simple as, say, let's take the worst case scenario. You've got a bunch of teenagers, and they're having pizza and soda. If you ate the pizza and then drank the soda at the end of the meal, you would be leaving your mouth at a pH of 2.2, which is a little bit better than battery acid because of the soda. If you drank the soda and finished with a little bit of the mozzarella cheese that was lying around off your pizza, your mouth would be protected by the oils, the calcium, the phosphates, and the fact that the cheese alkalizes your mouth. The timing of the food versus the drink makes all the difference to whether the teeth are going to be damaged or not. And at the end of the day, it is a teeter-totter. It is a balance. It is a bank account. Think of it however you want, with this balancing act between how much damage has occurred each day versus how much help or how much protection your teeth have had each day. And that is length of time. So it is how much damage, how long have your teeth been damaged today versus how long have your teeth been helped today. And if you have spent the day sipping coffee, which is acidic, even sipping herbal tea, even sipping water with a slice of lemon in it. And I see older ladies doing that all the time. No wonder their teeth are dark and yellow and damaged. And you know, it's what you sip is of extreme importance to your teeth. And there really isn't any drink that I believe is totally safe to sip for extended periods of time. And I'm beginning more and more to say, I think the sipping of quantities of water, it can even damage teeth. Because most of the time our water isn't really alkaline, and it may be just sort of, may not be as helpful as we think it is. I tend to feel drinking in batches and then trying not to drink may be better for us. And one of the things I do now is with clients, I let them eat whatever they want for breakfast, but make sure they end with a tooth-protective food. And that's really dairy. I mean, like plain yogurt. I would suggest an organic yogurt, cheese, generally nuts. I'm not totally sure that all nuts are healthy for your teeth. That's why I'm a little bit hesitant about that. And that's where xylitol comes in. I absolutely know that ending a meal with a little bit of xylitol is terrific. You can dip a strawberry. Strawberries naturally contain xylitol, as do raspberries. Dip them in a little few crystals of xylitol and end the meal with that. If you measure your pH after that, you'll see it's nice and alkaline. And if you're going to sip anything during the morning, if you're sitting at your desk and you have to sip something, I would say get water, try and get alkaline water, something that runs at a pH that's at least 7, 7.2, 7.4, and add a little bit of xylitol to it. But I beg people in the afternoon, after lunchtime, to try not to eat or drink anything after lunch. And the reason for this is that your saliva, the quality of your saliva, nature built our saliva to, really our saliva is the liquid that bathes our teeth. And if that liquid is full of minerals and good things, they will be absorbed by our teeth. If we never allow our teeth to interact, to really have face time with our saliva, we are depriving our teeth of that benefit. And it's really cool if you look at saliva, you'll see that it's thinnest, driest, the least amount, and the worst quality is during the night, usually sort of 2 a.m. And if there are, medical doctors listening, I think there's difference in our urine and our body pH at these same times during the night. And our saliva during the night becomes usually more acidic and less of it. It's worse for your teeth, which is why it's so important to prepare your teeth and protect them before you go to sleep at night, because they're about to embark on the worst 8 hours of their 24-hour journey in your mouth, because they're going to be dry and they're going to have the least protection from your natural saliva. During the afternoon, at 2 p.m. after lunch or thereabouts, is when you have the best quality saliva. It's usually full of the most minerals, it's the most alkaline, and you have the most of it. And if you have just eaten a super nutritious lunch that can alkalize your body, and, in order to alkalize your body, we're learning more and more. I mean, I even go as far as to recommend, if you're taking a multivitamin or supplement, mineral supplement, maybe take it at lunchtime so that you are really boosting your 2 p.m., the early afternoon saliva, and go out of your way not to sip, not to eat or drink. Finish your lunch. have your xylitol at the end of lunch, maybe on a strawberry or something like that, or even one of the mints, and then try not to chew, not to eat, not to snack, not to drink for a couple of hours after lunch. And just give that a try and see how your teeth feel after a few hours on their own, as I call it, face time with good saliva. And you may be quite amazed at the way they feel and they look. You ask for teeth. Chilies has been shown to be particularly good for teeth. They've done a number of studies where they have seen what's in cheese, the nutrients in cheese, happen to perfectly nurture teeth. I think that you can get that from other, probably organ meats, from broths, oxtail soups, chicken broth, well made with organic chickens. I mean, this is an alkaline, mineral-rich liquids of all these kinds. I'm certain are good for you. I certainly believe in probiotics or fermented foods being good for your bacterial health of your digestive tract, and there's no doubt that impacts also your mouth health. So I try to encourage people to eat an anti-inflammatory diet, which would be omega-3s, plenty of green leafy vegetables, but be aware that leafy vegetables, and that includes the leaves of tea, contain phytates, a lot of them. That is a toxin. It's a small amount. But if you are eating a lot of raw vegetables or even a lot of vegetables, I believe, and drinking a lot of tea, the phytates work a little bit like the baking soda and the peroxide. They can dissolve this important film that we need on your teeth to protect it. It's made with proteins and good bacteria. It's called pellicle. And pellicle is your enamel, is your cell of your tooth, but this pellicle protects the cell of your tooth from damage. And the phytates in vegetables and certainly the acidity of citrus fruits, and also the acidity of things like cranberries, can definitely dissolve this pellicle. And when it's gone, that leaves your teeth vulnerable. Remember we were saying how cleaning your teeth too often denudes them, how these harsh chemicals can denude the teeth? Well, drinking a lot of herbal teas can do the same thing. Drinking a lot of acidic drinks, if you're going to drink lemonade or it's all lemon juice, very healthy for you, but you will destroy your teeth, not because you're promoting bad bacteria, but because you're denuding your teeth of this waxy layer that is necessary to protect your teeth from mechanical, chemical, and thermal damage. What does that mean? It means that next time you clean your teeth, they'll probably erode, they'll wear away. It means that when you drink hot and cold things, they'll feel more hot and more cold than you like. Your teeth will be sensitive. And worse, they will stain more easily. And that might just encourage you to do harmful things like bleaching them. So when you drink your herbal tea, when you drink your lemon juice, when you drink your cider vinegar, all those helpful things, try to do it before a meal or before you end your meal, and end with something tooth protective. And that's where xylitol can be so helpful.
Dr. Ellie, let's talk about how to build our teeth back up once they are damaged. And when do we know when to visit the dentist? Say we have a cracked tooth or something of that nature. How do we know when to go and when we can build them up on our own?
Well, everybody can build their teeth. Everybody can build their teeth to be better. If you work through your day to protect your teeth more often than you damage them. In other words, you are going to end every meal with some xylitol or a tooth protective food like a piece of cheese. Then you will be limiting the amount of damage done during the day. If you can make your diet such that your body becomes more and more alkaline, well, great. That's great. And do the, if you take up yoga, you can de-stress. All of those things are going to limit the amount of time your teeth are damaged. But using these mouth rinses that I talk about in the book, even though they're not very exotic mouth rinses, it's the Listerine and the Act and the Crest and the Closest. If you use those, and my book does explain why they work in harmony with xylitol. What you're doing during the day will be enhanced with the use of these products, and you will remineralize. You will put minerals back into your teeth. There is a gentleman who's written a book. His name is Raymond Nagel, and he's sort of an anti-xylitol person, and he has a long relationship with the Western Price Foundation, and he recommends all kinds of broths and stews, and he has a whole dietary thing about rebuilding teeth with, I think, they're organ meats and bone broth and so on. And there's a lady in Australia who gives similar kind of advice. I don't give that advice because I can't tell you for certain if it works. And I don't honestly believe the people who are giving out this information can also guarantee you success. I will guarantee if you use the mouth rinses in the order, in the way, in the method, like a cake recipe, if you follow it exactly, I will guarantee you that 6 months from now, you will go back to your dentist, and if you say absolutely nothing, you'll sit in the chair, open your mouth, and they will say, wow, what are you doing? And actually, that's written on the back of my book, wow, your dentist, because that is what they say. Wow, well, what are you doing? Either the hygienist or the dentist. I beg you to say nothing. If you tell them that you're not flossing, you're using what Dr. Ellie suggested and xylitol and things like that, they will not support you. If you just say, just try harder and do it for another 6 months, you will be able to go back. And the second time you go back, they will probably say to you, wait a minute, what are you doing? And at that point, you can be really confident that the first time they saw a difference, and the second time they saw the same amount of difference, maybe more. And now that you've got their attention, they want to know, what are you doing? And that's the point at which you may or may not decide to tell them. I mean, I usually say, make them wait for 2 years. Make them beg you to tell you what you're doing. Because so often they will sow the seeds of disbelief or negativity and put you off track. But if you use what I recommend, and you do have to care for your teeth. Basically what you're doing, I mean, we talked at the beginning of why is this message so different? I think traditional dentistry is the next best thing. You're putting your teeth in the hands of your healthcare professional and saying, do what you can to look after me. I'm going to come every 6 months or every 4 months, clean up my teeth the best you can, try to help me with my once every 4 months, once every 6 months visit. Put whatever you can find on my teeth, and let's hope they're okay. I'm telling you, take responsibility. Protect your teeth after everything you eat and drink. You've got to be disciplined. Never go to bed unless you have protected your teeth before you go to bed at night. If you go to bed at night drinking wine, which is acidic, or beer, or lemonade, or soda, you're going to bad teeth. So you have to take responsibility for your teeth yourself. But if you do that, you will see this dramatic difference that dentists have never witnessed before. And it's so fun. I mean, that's why the Kiss Your Dentist Goodbye title is really tongue-in-cheek, because you're going to love going to the dentist. This book was not written to say don't ever go back. It's saying enjoy dental visits, take control. You can go once every year and you can be commended. You'll be the star of the show. They'll be like, wow, tell us. And
Right.
and I just think that's so neat. Why shouldn't it be like that?
Well, I'm
Why
thinking
should
about
you?
giving your book to my dentist.
Well, yeah, I think that they'd be more impressed if they saw the results.
Yes, that too. Well, I mean, once they see the results and
Oh,
take
yeah.
the book with me, right?
But
It is-
they're hard to convince because they've heard it all before. They've got all these salesmen. They've been trained usually. And Procter & Gamble keep bleaching. When I was a student, bleaching was an absolute no-no. I mean, it was going to damage teeth. And today, everybody bleaches teeth. And dentists have been trained to believe it's perfectly fine. And you won't see any of the negative stuff. And who trains these students at dental school are the makers of the products. They actually bring in the product companies, and the product companies train the dental students how to use the product, and they give them free stuff. Of course they don't tell them the negative stuff. If you read my chapter on whitening, you'll see the things that I'm very worried about. I'm worried about the fact that a lot of this bleaching stuff, like a Crest white strip or some such, has a pH of 1. We were talking about pH and that 2.2 is nearly battery acid. A pH of 1 thrown on your teeth is actually, your tooth enamel is the closest thing to glass. Tooth enamel is made up of calcium and phosphates, and it's clear. It's completely clear. It doesn't have a color. How do you whiten glass quickly? You etch it with acid. That is exactly what half of these whitening things are doing. They are etching the glass. They are damaging with acid your enamel, your glass frontage that protects your teeth, the inner surface of your teeth. Once the enamel has been damaged, there is usually also peroxide. And the peroxide goes into the live part of the tooth. And believe me, the cells inside your teeth do not like that. And they react for many weeks after the bleaching. And to say that bleaching is perfectly fine, we do not have the length of studies or enough to show that it is fine. And particularly for children, because the live part of the tooth is very near the surface. So you get more. Sometimes people don't understand how a tooth is designed. I say a tooth is a lot like an egg. You have this thin shell on the outside. You have the egg white, and the yolk in the middle is where all the live stuff is. The blood vessels and the cells, and the inside of the tooth is like the yolk of an egg. The difference is, in a tooth, that the cells in the yolk of the egg have little arms. And although the cell isn't in the egg white, the arm of the cell travels through the egg white, right up to the enamel. And that's the stuff called dentin. That's why dentin has a color, because it's actually alive. It's got the arms of the cells in little tubes. And that's why when your dentist cuts into the dentin, it hurts. It hasn't killed the nerve. It hasn't killed a nerve. It's not a nerve there. It's just the arm of a cell, a live cell, that is in contact with nerves. And so you don't get bleeding. You do have sensation. But when you bleach these little arms, when the peroxide gets down on them, they can change. It can really make the little arms frizzle up, and it can really make the cell in the yolk kind of make a really bad face. It really doesn't like it. And my concern is that they have found when children bleach their teeth, when new young teeth come through and are bleached, the cells in the inside of the tooth look a lot like radiation damage. The kind of damage you'd get if you irradiated the body. The cells change. And I'm just really, really hoping that we don't end up with a plethora of leukemia or something like that in 15 years, because the cells inside teeth are very volatile. They're almost like stem cells. Some of them are stem cells that can change and morph and go places, and they may be very important to us. And your listeners who believe that teeth have, some people believe there are sort of meridians, and teeth have certain teeth have certain effects on certain parts of the body. We may find that is a connection of the cells. I don't know enough about it, but to be bleaching them at 7, 8, 9 years old, we must be crazy. We must be crazy to do this. And I think people have no idea how dangerous it is. And some of these mouth rinses that are out there will give people mouth cancer. They are co-carcinogens. And the American Dental Association knows it. And when I called them on it and said, how can you allow those rinses to be out there for people, those whitening rinses? And they explained that these have been categorized as cosmetics, and they have no control over cosmetics. They're the American Dental Association. They don't get into that category. So there's games being played with the public all over the place. And unfortunately, vanity wins out, and you kind of think because everybody's doing it, it's fine. I'm here to say I would never let my kids bleach their teeth. I have never bleached. I bleached mine once. I tried the Crest White Strips when they first came out, and that's when I got my pH paper and tested the pH and said, you're kidding me. And actually, I did damage my gums and had to regrow them. I was pretty upset, but very, very dangerous products.
Dr. Ellie, what do you think about root canals? How I've heard that they're extremely toxic, and that if you get to that point, the tooth should just be extracted, that there's really nothing can be done. What is your take on that?
Yeah, it's a big subject. Again, I have thought at length about it, and I'm a very, very old dentist. And then I had a personal experience of a root canal. I was a new dental student, and there was a graduating class, and one of these guys was looking for a patient, and he had to have a two-surface filling. And as I mentioned, I had virtually no treatment ever. And this guy took an x-ray and said, oh, yes, perfect. You're exactly what I need. And I was so young and naive and stupid. I let this guy use me as his patient. And in drilling, he drilled too deep, and he went into the nerve on the inside of my tooth. And he failed his exam. But worse than that, here was I with almost no dental damage to my teeth, and suddenly I had now got a root. The nerve, all the inside of my tooth was exposed by this crazy guy who had cut too deeply into my tooth. And back then, they all felt very bad for me, the examiners, and one of the faculty took me aside, and he did this root canal on my tooth. He took out the rest of the nerve, and in place of it, he put silver points. And you see, that whole story is fine, in my opinion, because A, the tooth wasn't infected. It wasn't a cavity. It wasn't an abscess. It was kind of like an accident. If you're in an accident and your tooth gets sheared off, usually that happens to front teeth, in a baseball game or something like that. They've got to take you, once that nerve has been, or the inside live part of the tooth has been cut like that, it won't grow back. You've got to do something. And in those circumstances, there's no infection, there's no inflammation, there are no bad bacteria. And providing that the root canal treatment is done quickly and done well, with good ingredients, with good filling materials, basically they take out all the live parts, clean up the tooth, and then replace the missing live part with some kind of filling material. I am incredibly happy that I have silver in my tooth. Silver is antibacterial. I think it's very biocompatible. I wish we still use silver points to do fillings, root fillings. The trouble was that in the 80s, silver became too expensive, and then they started using plastic. I'm not sure that plastic is as good a material, but I'm not sure that it's bad. I don't know. I think it's what they use today is a plasticky material. And I really can't comment on that filling material. I can comment more on the fact that when it's trauma, when it's an accident, like mine was, I think a root canal is a fine alternative. I've had no trouble, and that was when I was 17. I mean, that's 40 plus years ago, and it's absolutely fine, and I've never had any reason to believe it has any negative effect on my body. However, the majority of root canals are done when people have had infection, abscesses, the root canals are not done well, the tooth gets reinfected, they get a course of antibiotics, they get fistulas, drainage. These things should not be in people's mouths. This is just a mess of chronic infection, and who knows how much damage that is doing. And if you can't afford to have a good root canal done, whether it's an accident or because of a cavity, I happen to be lucky. I had faculty doing a great root canal, and when I take an x-ray, it's beautifully done. But a badly done root canal that has an area of infection on it, once it's been badly done, I would not redo it, because I do not believe I really do not believe, even with modern technology, that you can ever completely clean down the end of root canals. And the reason is that it's not, people love to draw the picture of sort of like three prongs going down into your jawbone. A root of a tooth, the actual way the live tissue is far more like the root of an oak tree. You have the tributaries and then little dividing off and then dividing off, and you've got a branch system, which is a root system, but a root system of ever branching into smaller and smaller tributaries. And there isn't a way that a dentist from the top of the tooth can get down into all those tributaries once it's got infected. And I really fear that when you fill up the tooth, you block bacteria in these tributaries down there, and they're kind of stuck between your body. They can't get out, they can't go anywhere, they never resolve. And I do believe that people have had autoimmune issues because of bad root canals. And I think it is incredibly difficult to do a good root canal. And I have one resource in upstate New York. When people ask me, who can I go to for a good root canal, I always ask him. There's one guy I trust, of all the people that I know, to tell me who can do a root canal. I'm sure there are other dentists who are good at it, but it's a very difficult thing to do well. You have to do it well enough to push the filling material to the very, very end of these tributaries. You have to clean the tooth really, really well. I would only go to a specialist, and personally, I would only go to a specialist that has been recommended to me by this one guy that I trust. That's how difficult I think they are to do. And if you can't get to one of those, or you can't afford one of those, then take out the tooth. Don't leave it there. And actually, that was the advice I gave to my own son. Now, my own son is quite an interesting story, because he grew up listening to his mom, doing what he was told pretty much. Then he went off as the rebel college kid and traveled around the country and did things and ate things he shouldn't have done. I doubt if he cleaned his teeth for the whole time he was gone and did some damage to them. And then he got back on using my system, and then he met someone who was totally opposed to fluoride and didn't want to have anything to do with the Crest toothpaste or the products that I recommended. And the whole family was all about eating well and completely natural. It would be fine. And this was really when we discovered how once you have damaged teeth, once your teeth have fillings in them, they are damaged. And without any fluoride, and my son tends to have a blocked nose. He's always had difficulty breathing through his nose. So he has a very dry mouth, which is a high risk factor. Even though he's living a very healthy diet, healthy lifestyle, using, maybe the tooth soap, I forget what they were using now, it wasn't enough to protect his teeth, and a big chunk of a molar broke off. So much so that he now needed a root canal and couldn't afford it. And he wasn't living around here, and I felt he was a grown person. I wasn't going to pay for it. He had the tooth out. My recommendation was take the tooth out. And then it happened to, I think, a second molar, from what I recall, at which point he then went back to using my system. He and his wife and the whole family decided they really believed that once your teeth have been damaged, once you have a weakness because you have a filling in your tooth, if you have a risk factor of some kind, in his case dry mouth, you need fluoride. You need the help of these other mouth rinses. So he lost 2 teeth because he couldn't afford to have a good root canal done, and that was my advice to him. Take it out. And that would be my advice to anybody. Up to the point where the only real question is that there are studies to show that less than nine teeth appears to have a detrimental effect on your mental capacity. In other words, if you're older and you're down to less than 9 teeth, you may be more likely to end up with some kind of dementia. So I don't know if having an implant or having a root canal can defer that problem, but we do have several big studies that show losing all your teeth is not a good thing. And if you do, for any reason, if you have already got, if it's your mother or somebody's already lost all their teeth, try to encourage them to at least replace them with dentures rather than no teeth. Because it would appear that when you don't replace them, this less than 9 teeth thing, if you have no teeth in your mouth, you're even more likely to have dementia. And I don't know why. I mean, I don't know the connection, but teeth are important.
Dr. Ellie?
Yes.
What do you think about getting X-rays in the molars and that, especially children? I know with children, they want to start taking X-rays, when they still have their baby teeth or just past that. What do you think about that?
My kids have probably had 2 X-rays in their lives. They had an X-ray to see that the teeth were all there. I would recommend an X-ray at about 6, 7 years old. It can be helpful to determine if you're missing adult teeth. You can give parents some, decent advice. I think it's a worthwhile thing to know if you are missing teeth. So I would tend to be in favor of a good all-around X-ray. Today, with some of the digital X-rays, is pretty minimal radiation. And I would say at about 6, 7 years old. Prior to that, I believe there is very little reason to take X-rays. Studies show that X-rays provide very little extra information over and above what you would gain by visual observing, looking carefully at the teeth. One of the things I forget to tell people, because I sort of so know it, is that tooth decay happens in a pattern. The first place, it's always the weakest places that decay first. And the first place to decay in an adult's tooth is always the groove in the middle of the biting surfaces of molar teeth. So you're very unlikely to have decay in between your teeth if you have never had decay in the grooves, the biting surface grooves of your teeth. And that's why I believe we need to really understand what's going on. Patients need to know why they don't want sealants. Sealants were developed in the late 80s to block up the grooves of molar teeth. This is a good idea if you say to a parent, that the first place to decay is the grooves of molar teeth. We're going to seal these up. Sounds like a good idea. The problem is that if at 6 years old you put a sealant on the grooves of the molar teeth, two things happen. Now we can't tell if that mouth is healthy. We've just got blocked up grooves. We don't know if they're still healthy, if they're about to decay. We can't see them. We can't feel them. We are basically now, we've lost our marker. And without that marker, you really don't know what's going on between the teeth. The good news is that for 4 years, after the age of 6 to the age of 10, you don't have any permanent teeth touching each other. They haven't fully erupted. So there shouldn't be any reason for an X-ray between the ages of 6 and 10, even if you've put sealants on the 6-year-old's teeth. There isn't, I can't think of a good reason why you would need one. Once the permanent teeth are all in the mouth and touching one another, if you've not placed sealants, you should be able to tell if that mouth is healthy or not by looking at the grooves in the molar teeth. The big problem today is that when we've sealed all those molar grooves with sealant, the only way to check on the health of that mouth is with an X-ray. And that makes it a very nerve-wracking, I think that is it's really difficult to know. I think it's scary for these children because all of a sudden they potentially could have suddenly about 15 fillings in their teeth, where every tooth touches together could potentially become a filling, a hole, a cavity. It's not a filling. It's a cavity that would need a filling. And if you talk to a bunch of teenagers, particularly ones that drink soda, they may have these horror stories of suddenly going to the dentist and having 10, 12, 15 fillings that need doing. And that's what's happened. And it's because nobody could predict it. They'd taken away the one thing we can do to warn young kids that their teeth are not going well. We can't see that anymore. We've blocked that off and masked it. And now the good news is that if they suddenly tell your son or daughter that they've got 14 small cavities in between all their teeth, they love to call them flossing cavities. They're not. They're just the next place to decay when you would normally have decay first in the molar grooves, second in between the teeth. It has very little or nothing to do with flossing. It has everything to do with what they're drinking and snacking on and eating. And I would take that child and have a very serious conversation with them and tell them it takes about a year for these cavities to form to the first stage. It will take about 6 months if you do everything that Dr. Ellie says with the mouth rinses, with the xylitol, with the not drinking after lunch, with being really controlled. You could get nature to repair all those fillings for you. that would be a time 6 months or a year later when you go back after doing all these good things to your teeth to insist that you have another x-ray to see the progress that you have made. That would be a really good reason to have a duplicate x-ray taken to show that your teeth have not got worse, they have actually got better. If they're not completely better, they're a lot better. And if you continue doing what you're doing, retake that x-ray to show that they are now completely perfect again. But to keep taking x-rays year after year, the only reason to do that would be because you have no idea what's going on in that mouth, and that's because you've blocked up the molar grooves. I don't like the idea of all these x-rays for young children. I say, once a year, you've got to ask your dentist why. What are you going to learn from taking this? What are you going to learn from taking it? Since my child has nothing wrong with the grooves of their teeth, I am not going to have them sealed up. Thank you. I appreciate the offer. I'd rather we look at them. Please tell me if you see anything negative happening to them. Because you won't get decay between the teeth until you have decay in the molar grooves. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that whatever bacteria get into these molar grooves dominate the mouth flora. And so, and this is another reason that in preschool they hand out Xylitol to preschoolers. At 4 or 5 years old, they hand out Xylitol to preschool children in Scandinavia so that they make sure that the flora, the environment, the bacteria in their mouths are perfect before the big adult molar teeth erupt. This way, the first bacteria to infect the grooves of those molar teeth are healthy ones. And basically, the first bacteria in those grooves wins the game. They then become a fountain of bacteria for the mouth, and all the other teeth, as they erupt, generally get infected with these healthy bacteria. And at that point, it's quite hard to change unless you do terrible things with horrible diets. You're more likely than not going to be protected, and your need for x-rays, your need for treatment, you are so much more protected, and you're on a great, your train tracks have been laid for the future. That's why every preschooler should really be getting enough xylitol. So molar grooves are important, and when you've blocked them up, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you can do except take x-rays. And how much you take those x-rays is how brave you are, how much you believe in my system. I'd say, once every 2 years, maybe once every year until you are sure that you are on a good track. Once you've been on a good track for years and what you're doing seems to be working, I think you can go way out every 2 years. The bite wing every 2 years, I think, is sensible, is all right. I wouldn't be opposed to that, but not for little children. I don't like the idea of little children having x-rays. And there's very little reason, unless they've got decay. So that's another very good reason for us to make sure they don't have decay. And you can wipe xylitol over baby teeth from the minute they erupt and protect them with that. And you won't need x-rays because your baby teeth will be beautiful. So,
Thank you, Dr. Ellie. And if we could switch gears for just a moment, what are your thoughts on having wisdom teeth pulled? That seems to be pushed on a lot of dental patients consistently.
oh, it's another of the ones that if they weren't paid for doing it, and that's the unfortunate thing with so much of this, whether it's cleanings, whether it's x-rays, if dentists had to do it and it cost them money, I believe you would have a completely different diagnostic profile of what needs doing. I have read studies over the years, and I did not extract the wisdom teeth of my youngest children because I really do not believe that you need to extract wisdom teeth just because they're wisdom teeth. I think the jawbone will grow and often accommodate quite amazingly. It is a potential hazard if you have an ugly, unhealthy mouth. Yes, you will probably have decay in the wisdom teeth because they are, that's where a lot of bacteria, bad bacteria can nestle. But if you have a healthy mouth because you're eating xylitol, you're using a mouth rinse system to clean your teeth, that mouth rinse system is getting right around that wisdom tooth area. It's going to keep it clean. My youngest daughter, as hers were erupting, called me in panic from college. Mom, my wisdom teeth are coming through. I said, oh, that's nice, good. Let's hope it's the age of wisdom. And she's like, no, I'm supposed to have them out, right? And no, absolutely not. You're supposed to make sure that you do a really good job brushing around them. Use the mouth rinse routine. Use your xylitol, and you won't have a problem. And she didn't. And, I think we could save a lot of people a lot of pain and suffering taking, just going a little slower, not rushing into it. I would have a couple of opinions, and I would drag it out a little bit, unless you're going to live in a foreign country or you honestly feel that the dentist feels that tooth is absolutely horizontal and never going to erupt, and you for some reason feel the age 15 or 17 is better for that extraction than waiting. But just like straightening teeth, I think they start very young, and I would be against the young. I would do most things later. I would take time. I don't think there are many reasons to rush into these things. And it may not matter whether you have wisdom teeth or not, but I think that we are very extraction happy. And I think that providing you keep that area clean, it would appear that they can sometimes come through even if they don't look like they're going to. And they don't squish your teeth up. That whole thing is not true. Just because your wisdom teeth look like they would press on the line and move them all forward, that has never, ever been proven. There's no studies to show that.
Okay. Thank you, Ellie. This has been extremely informative evening for all of us. And you mentioned earlier in the interview that you're thinking about writing another book, and we'd certainly love to have you back to talk about any new work that you have going on. What about any upcoming speaking engagements? Do you have any interviews coming up?
Yeah, I'm doing some live. I love doing live seminars. I find that I've now met a group of chiropractors and acupuncturists who are most interested in this in Texas, in Austin, Texas. And I feel that there are probably places around the country where there are alternative groups and chiropractors who probably would embrace this. And that's kind of my dream at this point, is to educate in groups, and maybe from there develop into some corporate education, because I do believe that as healthcare becomes more expensive, as people get deductibles and they can keep the money if they don't spend it, that is the best thing we can do to encourage people to be healthy. That is actually how the Swiss dental system works. The bigger the filling, the bigger your co-payment. So Swiss people were very interested in preventing fillings from getting bigger because their co-payments got bigger with every filling, the increase in the size of the filling. If we pay people for keeping their teeth healthy, and if we pay dentists for having patients with healthy teeth, I think we get a lot more of this education out there. There's no incentive right now. That's one of the big problems. If you have a patient, when you're looking for a dentist, one of the bits of advice I give people when they're looking, they say, Ellie, how do we find a dentist like you? And I tell them, make a list of people that you're considering going to. Make maybe 3 or 4 different offices, call up and find out how much a consultation would be. You'd like to talk to the dentist about your teeth. You don't want a whole lot of treatment, but you'd just like to go and maybe have an x-ray and talk to the dentist. How much would that cost? And say, well, thank you. I just inquiring. And does your practice believe in xylitol? Just throw that out to the office girl who's answered the phone and told you it's $120 for consults or whatever. Just ask her, what does your practice think about xylitol? And if she stammers and stutters or says, I've never heard of it, or, I have no idea what you're talking about, you probably want to cross that off your list. If, on the other hand, the answer is, oh, my doctor, he's such a believer in that. Oh, we love xylitol. We sell it in the practice, or we recommend it. You've probably got a in-tune practice where you're going to be able to discuss a lot of these things with that dentist. And that would be, in my opinion, your best way of sorting sheep from goats with the dental offices. Because if your front office have never heard the word xylitol spoken, it doesn't bode well that they're talking about prevention. I don't know how you could talk about prevention in America today without talking about xylitol in a dental office. And I think if you get somebody who understands that, you are more likely to get somebody who has read the studies about tumors. I mean, it's not a great study that was done recently that showed the increased incidence potentially from taking x-rays. But I just think we want to play safe. Why do more than you need? And I think you need a doctor that understands that. So, well, my pleasure. This has been great.
And again, this evening we've been speaking with Dr. Ellie Phillips, author of Kiss Your Dentist Goodbye. Our executive producer, Fox, provided the recording and technical support of our show this evening. You can listen to more Time Monk Radio interviews at timemonkradio.com, Time Monk Radio's Facebook page, and on Time Monk Radio YouTube channel. On behalf of all of us at Time Monk Radio, be well.